See, a doggerel moment.
There you go.
You gotta have some of those.
I had a lot.
You've had many. You've had a doggerel life, in fact.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, this is a big moment for you and obviously also for us because at this point, we have been working on this show for
3.5, almost 4
I was
years.
gonna say 5.
It's been that
Feels
long.
like 10.
Doggerel years.
My goodness. Yes, and trying to kind of get a good grip on this moment has been the circumstance I've been living with, actually. Because there's just a lot of people that are familiar with my work here in LA and have not seen the depth of the work that you guys are presenting.
I love the fact that your work in some ways is hard to pin down.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's so many different versions, iterations, experiments. And I find that fascinating because I feel like a lot of other people are invested in having something very clear cut, but you are without your interpretation.
I love that Ulysses Jenkins is the first Black video artist.
He assumed the role of a West African griot in storytelling and showing the richness of the culture.
He challenges what limits there are to what performance art is, to what video art is, what conceptual art is, what Black art is.
He's thinking the right way about being a human being and about the other human beings in the world. And that is the kind of person that we ought to hear more from, not less.
Ulysses was always interested and continues to be interested in multiculturalism. The idea that we all have something to offer.
Ulysses was really experimenting on the cutting edge. I mean, he made it possible to reach a larger audience through his videos.
He's such a pioneer in his craft that it's unthinkable that it's taken this long for the canon to recognize the immense contribution that he's made to video and performance work.
Ulysses was born in 1946 in Los Angeles. He grew up in a household with his father, who was a barber, and his mother, who was a homemaker. Both of them were creative. His father was a doodler. He would do drawings kind of in the afternoons. And his mom, he ended up finding out, was a singer earlier in her life. And so Ulysses says that a lot of his inspiration for entering into art, entering into drawing, really came from watching his dad making cartoons.
Of course, the next picture is a picture of my dad's barber shop. Him standing there with his partner, and they had some customers when they took the photograph. When he doodled, when I was a kid, on one Sunday, I got very interested in what he was doing, and that led me to actually doing drawing and things of that nature. I could probably say that I got a lot of creative notions from him and then creative notions from my mother as well. She used to sing in the choir, so of course she'd sing around the house and we'd join in.
Ulysses goes to Southern University in 1964, and this is a really interesting moment for Ulysses because up until this point he spent his life in Los Angeles, and this is really the first time he's grappling with and engaging with, you know, these extreme racial tensions. I think this was a really important moment for him because this is also the first time he is amongst predominantly Black folks in an educational space. And I think there's something to that, a sort of Black excellence that he picks up in that process.
I'm looking at this picture with me and another good friend of mine, Alvin Carline was his name. We're standing there being photographed when they had a protest at the campus. And this is during the late 60s. there were some civil rights leaders who had come to campus and spoke. After we had done that particular protest on the campus, Ku Klux Klan came to the campus and burned a cross to try to tell us indirectly, no matter what kind of black leadership comes and talks to us, they still would be around enforcing their realities on society and as well the campus life.
Ulysses graduates from Southern University in 1969, and he comes back to Los Angeles. And he's still really interested in pursuing an art career. He's really interested in getting into UCLA, so he submits his portfolio and he actually gets rejected. This is a really interesting sort of kismet moment because he meets Gary Lloyd, a prominent sculptor at the time who was a professor at Otis. And he runs into him and he's like, you should apply to Otis. We have this incredible professor there right now, Charles White, and also people like Betty Saar. And so Ulysses, takes a few years to sort of figure some things out. And in the meantime, he really gets interested in mural painting. And so he moves to Venice and he starts working throughout the Venice community, mural making, art making in general, and then he's introduced to the Porta Pack.
The Boardwalk of Venice was when I was introduced to video through a video workshop. And the first time to have the opportunity to record, erase, and then play again and display that information on a TV monitor or TV set, it was like a miracle. Early video was an anti-medium, anti the establishment by the way in which the subject matter that the artists were approaching was a critical look at the medium and the message of the media.
Ulysses had the foresight to use his camera in the service of others. One of the things that he talks about in his early work in particular is the lack of positive images of Black people. And he was able to make really complicated images of himself as a representative of Black masculinity. But then he was very aware of being able to use this new technology to really show his love and value for Black culture. A great example of that is remnants of the Watts Festival.
Between Ulysses going from undergrad to graduate school, he goes to Santa Monica College, and Ulysses ends up taking a Black cinema class. And during that class, he encounters the director, Stanley Kramer, who produced and directed Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. And this is 1977, so you're seeing this real critical moment in Ulysses' career where he's making documentary films. And he's making a documentary film called District F at Santa Monica College. After meeting Kramer, he then makes Massive Images, which is a huge response to literally the entire history of Hollywood film's depiction of Black Americans. And he uses that to then apply to Otis College. And I think it's really important to remember that some of Ulysses' most famous works, Remnants of the Watts Festival, as well as Massive Images, all come before he even goes to grad school.
You're just a massive image you've gotten to know from years and years of TV shows.
The hidden thing and the hurting pain is written and bitten into your veins.
I won't and I don't relate.
But I think for some, it's too late.
Ulysses starts at Otis in 1978. And this is a really interesting time because he gets into the intermedia department and he comes to know essentially the only three other Black students at the time, Kerry James Marshall, Greg Pitts, and Ronnie Nichols. And so they all form a fast friendship and bond. Not only forms his friendship with them, but he performs one of his most important videos, Two-Zone Transfer, with them.
Yeah, boy! They wanted to laugh at Nicholas's peculiar music and dance and be serenaded with tender, popular music. But there was nothing peculiar about our music. Those are the only things we had left from ceremonial and ritual life in Africa.
Now look, you. We were making a lot of money off of your image. We built an American institution around it that will outlive our own time.
See, the thing about going to Otis, and I don't know if you have that same kind of challenge these days, but when I was going to that school, there was sort of like this unspoken myth that if the work you were doing wasn't challenging, you weren't doing anything. My challenge was to try to do media art and have a African American background attached to it, because at a certain point when I had this one crit where I was setting up and leaving an image of myself in pause on the monitor and everybody starts to laugh. And I couldn't figure out why you're laughing. I'm not doing anything comedic. I'm not trying to tell you a joke. And at the same time, it was just an image in pause. That gave me something to also consider. If this is the way people wanted to perceive of the black image, that fits right into this whole notion around people laughing at black images, period.
You know, all I've ever wanted to do was to be myself and to be good at what I do. But I've been abused and confused, sidetracked by many things. But after a dream like that, I know I've got direction. I know what I'm up against.
I mean, what you're saying about people coming in and laughing at you makes me think more about how doggerel came into your work, you know, and thinking about how comedy has always been a form of survival for Black folks to tell stories.
Yes, well, that's how I ended up with the definitive. See, the thing is, when I found doggerel, of course, by that interview that Marlon Brando gave the calendar section about him playing the father of Superman, I thought, well, what does this word mean? And so when I found out the irregular variation on a theme, and that sometimes a comedic verse, I said, aha. What I recognized in graduate school is that the artists who are capable of ascending, I'll call it that, out of the just mainstream regularity, you had to have something specifically different. And so I was trying to find that genre or that difference that I could possibly be a part of or make myself. And that's what I decided to do, was make doggerel.
Well, I think with doggerel, it's also, there's so many different ways in which you're working with it, because it also means poorly expressed and poorly written. And you're sort of playing with that with video, which is also being perceived in that moment as like a poorly expressed format. You also pick it up as a full editing technique. So it's like, it's totally expansive the way that you're thinking about it. It's not just like one way, this definitive way of working with doggerel.
It speaks to a Black experience.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, this irregularity, I think, of an experience in which you are made to, I think, survive in a situation that you were never supposed to be in.
Well, you're defining exactly how I perceived it.
Yeah.
Because the whole notion that we as Black people have had to endure this cultural phenomena that's supposedly based on a constitution about freedom. Well, why are we going through these experiences that we're going through? You know, I mean, we still can't be free.
Before I was married, my name was Jenkins. I was born Maren Jenkins. So maybe Ulysses and I are actually somehow related. We never explored that, but it's entirely a possibility, I suppose. We were both artists in Los Angeles, both African Americans, at a time when to be a serious artist in Los Angeles and an African American was kind of a rarity, I think, you know. I mean, we had both gotten these educations that got us ready to compete with everyone else. and yet we were not like everyone else because we had been historically excluded.
At that point in the game, in the 80s, we were getting no play at all from the establishment, which was fine. We had to do things in the way that we wanted to do them. And so a lot of Ulysses performances included people from other cultures. Nobuko Miyamoto, Mei-san, Chrono, these are all people that were part of our little circle as we chose to develop ideas that had not been developed in any particular way.
Our world actually was multicultural, and it was the outside world and the media that always wanted to separate all the different races, and that just wasn't the case. I definitely remember when Ulysses received his big NEA fellowship, which was a big deal during that time. And I remember I was so impressed that he used that funds to open up his studio to invite other artists in to collaborate and to create new works.
He made a platform not only for technology, but for dance, poetry, music, visual arts, all in one space.
Other Visions is a studio, an entity, a band, a sort of shape-shifting incubator that bends itself to Ulysses's interest and practice. And the reason he called it Other Visions was because he was really thinking about this term other as it relates to the group of artists that he was surrounded by, specifically the Black and Brown and POC artists at the time who were not getting any sort of support or representation from, major museums in the city and major galleries in the city.
I'll come to this picture of Other Visions studio, which is where a lot of my early work actually derived out of. And actually, there's a video in the show where it shows myself, Senga Nengudi, Maren Hassinger, Mei-san, and Chrono doing performative exercises with Rudy Perez. My whole notion of Other Visions studio was that we as artists of color had no place that we could come to and organize our thoughts and practice the different arts that we wanted to pursue. So that would lead me to Without Your Interpretation, which in this first photo, it has Liz Rodriguez, Chrono Childs, and Frank Parker in the image. In the video, you see the group of performers. The video opens up with them with their hands out and up against the wall. And that's primarily where they like to keep us, up against the wall. We as people of color had to support ourselves. And the fact, this is why I'm proud of the exhibition, because this is my way of saying thank you. My opportunity to say thank you to all the people that I worked with.
When I first met Ulysses, I was a little confused because here we were shooting in a pretty funky part of downtown. And this brother was so passionate, so extremely passionate. And talk about Afrofuturism. I mean, this was the first time I got involved with an artist of color who was really thinking about changing the perception, changing the narrative, and telling a different story.
I felt a lot of emotion in organizing this show, and I think there were lots of moments of Erin and I being in your archives, looking at rejection letters. I think when I was coming through and compiling your exhibition history, feeling just really frustrated at the art world and really being like, how did everyone sleep on you for this long? I mean, I think there's two things. First off, I feel so moved by your practice that you have been so dedicated to making work and thinking through these ideas of representation, questioning the media, thinking about how we can present our ideas as Black people, but also as people of color collectively outward, outside of kind of a white system. But I think coming back and looking at your exhibition history and seeing, you know, you've been out here doing this yourself with your friends for 50 years. And it is really frustrating. I'm so excited that we are in this moment to be able to present. You know, I think the fact that you were so far ahead of your time that it took this long for some youngins over here. I'm gonna call myself that for a moment.
I was like,
I'm gonna take that shine here. You know, to come along and put this show together for you, but for you to always know that your work is important. And I think that's the thing that I try to really impress upon younger artists, talking with curators, is that you have a respect for your work. You understood the worth of your work, and you maintained all of that, and you kept all of that, waiting for someone finally to come along and really sift through all of it together.
This is something you may have questions of. To one degree or another, I was hoping that one day y'all would show up. This particular time in my life is this is astonishing, and I'm in great amazement of what is occurring. Very happy and glad that I'm going to have this exhibition. I hope people get a lot of different enlightened thought from seeing my work. And I hope they really appreciate not only myself, but a lot of the people that are in my work. And that's what I feel most gracious about, the fact that this exhibition will be a really great thank you to all of them. This is like other visions. And the peacefulness and the goodness that we were trying to create. My name is Ulysses Jenkins. I'm a video artist. Sometimes I'm considered a video griot, and I tell stories.